Hello, fans of the Pixies and Vedic astrologers, Western astrologers. My name is artpinsof. I'm a Vedic astrologer, and today I'm going to look at the birth charts of the Pixies and their music, and we're going to see what we see. First off, I just want to say I just noticed this because here's about 11 out of the 13 charts I may be looking at. And Joey Santiago and Kim Deal, two of the members, the guitarist and the bassist of the Pixies, are born on the same day, 4 years apart. It's just amazing. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out right off the top. So in the previous video, I covered Fight Club because it was the thing responsible for the Pixies' greatest boost to fame and might have even been responsible for them getting back together and touring forever since, basically, although unfortunately without Kim Deal for the last 10, 15 years at least. But, you know, what we covered last time is that the ascendant was in Aries, so the ruler was Mars, together with Pluto in Sagittarius, and the sun was in Virgo, and the moon is also in Virgo. Right. We also covered Leo quite a bit, too, in the Venus in Leo. And I looked at the chart two ways last time, tropically and sidereally. This time I'm only going to be looking tropically using the methodology of Ernst Wilhelm, Victor Kara, Ryan Kurtzog, and others. I find this to be very compelling due to my recent research into ancient Vedic astrology and testing of specifically the Jaimini techniques for anyone who's familiar with that. But I won't go into that minutia here. Here we're just going to look at charts and I'll just talk about it. I'm using astroseek.com, which is a great free website. I've been helping the webmaster main programmer here with some of the code and a lot of the ideas to add to the side. It's called the sidereal page right now, calculator. And there's a few, you know, it's still working out the kinks, but there's a lot of really cool content on here that wasn't ever here before. Like now we can have tropical zodiac and sidereal nakshatras, which I personally am finding very useful at the moment. I'm going to be using a Campanus house system, true Chitra Ayanamsha, which is pretty much the same as the common Lahiri. I may wind up playing with the Panchanga of some of these charts, which I didn't do in the Fight Club chart. And we've got so many fun things that are added here now. The Arudha Lagnas, otherwise known as Arudha Padas, the Charakarikas, which are just so much fun to use, and on from there. The divisional charts, oh my god. Yes, I could spend 2 hours on a single chart here, and I'm going to try to do the total opposite, so we might not get to any of that stuff in this video. But just as a quick advertisement for this website, I mean, there's really some increasingly robust features on here as a free website for Indian Vedic astrologers. I really hope people start taking advantage of more because of that. And pretty soon we'll add in the South and North Indian charts, which I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, so let's just get into it. So today we're going to start with the first Pixies album. We're going to go through all four of their albums probably. They're a rock band from Boston, so I placed the birth chart of all their albums in Boston, Massachusetts, for that reason, which I find an effective way of doing this with albums. Just like if it's a movie and it's Hollywood and it's a wide release around the country, I'll do like, you know, Hollywood, or otherwise I'll just do wherever the premiere is, which is sometimes New York or a film festival. But for albums, I like to use whatever city they're from. Like when I covered Bowie, I did, you know, London when he was released his first music, and then later on we switched over to LA. But it could have stayed in London, to be honest. But anyway, we're just going to start. And I will be looking at the Indian signs, the nakshatras, and I will be using the tropical zodiac, but I'll use the sidereal zodiac for the nakshatras, which is something that's a little new to me. But my use of the nakshatras is not new, and everything else here. I've been putting a lot of time this last year into giving readings and doing analysis like this. Mostly of humans charts on one-on-one sessions for me, my friends, and professional and clients as a professional astrologer. But yeah, but I really like this avenue of exploring pop culture and movies and music and stuff, as well as the people who make it. So with that being said, we're going to jump into Surfer Rosa, the first album by the Pixies, one of their, like, really just one of the greatest albums of the 1980s, very influential on just so much music, including Nirvana. I mean, Kurt Cobain often said that his music wouldn't be what it was without the Pixies, and this was the album that really put them on the map. It's also the album that, like 10 years later, 11 years later after it came out, that the song Where's My Mind became a big hit and just kind of grew over time because of that movie Fight Club. And so we're going to notice any similarities in any of these charts to that, as well as, I guess that's enough said about that as a context. And if you're not familiar, I recommend checking out all of their music. If you're just coming at this video from a astrology or Vedic astrology perspective, all their albums are worth checking out, and I hope that my description of them through the lens of astrology will maybe make it sound exciting to want to check out. Okay, so right off the bat, we're going with a Cancer Ascendant for this album, and it's also an Ardra placement. So basically this means the album, it has this energy of Ardra, this energy of like combat, this energy of like a storm. It's not a punk rock album, but it's kind of just a unique album in how like the lead singer is screaming, but it's not overly heavy. It's not like heavy metal. It's very creative in how the music sounds. It's kind of punk rock, but it's also kind of how do you put it? It's kind of like the Beatles. Like I heard someone Iggy Pop described it as like punk rock meets the Beatles or something like that, which is fairly accurate. Well, that's the way he described Nirvana. But I feel like this album, it's very much the prototype for that in its own way. And the Ascendant is also in Cancer. So yeah, I feel like I'm going to have to do a series, like I said in my last video, where I wrap my brain around how these nakshatras match with the tropical zodiac now that I've switched it. But because I'm used to seeing Ardra in the middle of Gemini. Ardra has a very Gemini energy to it, but we have Cancer, which is ruled by the moon here. So it's an album that's very comforting as well. And this is really, okay, so the moon is in, the moon is in Taurus with Venus. So it's a very romantic album. It's a very like imaginative, emotional album. I mean, the moon and Venus together, Venus in its own sign, the moon exalted, and Jupiter. I mean, these are like the two benefics, like these three really cozy friends. Like for them, well, no, Jupiter and Venus don't get along so well, but they're both the two benefics. They're the two Brahmin planets. So we have this wisdom and this kindness. It's really interesting to think of this album that way. I mean, I'm trying to make sense of that off the top of my head. We're in the 11th sign is how I'm going to put that, because we also have the cusps. So we're going to interpret cusps separately from like houses in terms of a sign. That's also something unique to the system I've been practicing and learning. But basically, yeah, so it's an album that has a lot of benefit of like feminine comfort and expansion. But in this, I mean, Venus in Bharani. Bharani is moon ruled, and you have moon in Bharani and Venus in Bharani. And Bharani is also this kind of goddess-like sign of abundance. So interesting. So this album was kind of unique in the way Kim Deal was so key to it. I don't think the Pixies would have been what they were without the female member, who is Kim Deal. And we'll look at her chart in a minute. But basically, that's what I'm noticing here right off the bat with this chart, because it's an album that has the kind of like hard rock, punk rock energy of like guitars and drums, and Frank Black, the lead singer, sort of screaming at times and saying kind of intense things. But then it also has like the most catchy song on the whole album prior to Where's My Mind becoming a big hit was the song Gigantic, which was Kim Deal's song. And in fact, it was the only single from the album. There was no single for Where's My Mind or any other song for this album, only the song Gigantic, which was released as a single, and we'll look at that too, I think, briefly. So right off the bat, I mean, this is an album that is coming from a more feminine energy space. Even though it's punk rock, Ardra would, out of all the 27 nakshatras, Ardra would be the punk rock one. And so, what else can we say there? And it's in the 11th sign it's in the 11th house by sign. And so it's having this energy of benefit. It's having this energy of a band, a group that really works together. It's like the positive result of what they'd been working towards, because yeah, they made an EP before this, but this is really where it all kind of took off. So yeah, I mean, very auspicious to have the ruler of the ascendant in the 11th, and then also just Jupiter and Venus together, just very auspicious, very powerful feminine energy. There's even like this interlude where Kim Deal is kind of like giving her own character, her own personality as a human in the middle of the album, and you don't get that from any of the other members. It's like something where she's telling a weird story that's not really a story. It's hard to explain, but it's something about like guys in a locker room. It sounds slightly homoerotic or something like that. So there's this energy, and as far as I know, none of the band members are gay, but like there's this energy that's kind of like at a time when rock was at its most macho, its most, like glam, and like just music videos with tons of like beautiful women being treated as objects by, these dudes with big hair that were ironically very feminine in their presentation in that sense, but were just like very like, there was a lot of misogyny going on that was like kind of socially accepted, or culturally accepted, I mean, in terms of the rock world. And the Pixies, in a way, were kind of going against the grain because their music was very, like, different, and they had a woman behind their one lead single on their first album, which was the catchiest song, which got on college radio, which got them their first, like, wave of fame, really, like, outside of just critics enjoying the album. So that's really half of all we need to look at. We're also just going to look at the sun real quick. Sun in Aries is exalted. So we got exalted moon and exalted sun. I mean, this is an incredibly auspicious, time. Also, look at this. The album was released on right at the start of the tropical zodiac. It was released on 21st March, 1988. So, you got an exalted sun, which is the way I guess every tropical year would start for the first month. But yeah, it's just, but it's happening in the 10th house of work, where lots of good things are happening. But then you got the chaos of Rahu there, as you could see. The sun is in Uttara Bhadrapada, where it's same sign as Fight Club. So there's our first Fight Club connection. And so I was hoping there might be one that we would notice, because we're not looking at the full charts here. We're only looking at little aspects to keep it moving. But when I covered Fight Club in the last video, we had the ascendant in Uttara Bhadrapada in Aries at right about, let's get the exact degree here real quick. If I click on that button. So we're at 3 degrees of Aries for the ascendant of Fight Club, which means the thing people think about Fight Club is it's just an awesome movie, it's original, and then it has this nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapada that's bringing like the mystical down into reality. And that's the obvious thing about it. So with this, it's the opposite. It's like the sun is in direct conjunction with Fight Club, the movie that would eventually like take a different song from this album and make the Pixies incredibly famous because of it, Where's My Mind? And we have the sun in direct conjunction with Fight Club's ascendant, except the sun, unlike the ascendant, is not the most obvious thing. It's the thing that's at the heart. It's the soul of the album. So it's like on the surface, this album is like, oh, it's really like, it's like punk rock, it's 80s, it's exciting, the lead singer's screaming. And then the thing that really makes it super powerful is the feminine energy of Kim Deal, really is the secret weapon of the band, is what this is showing us. Oh, wow. And yeah, and the moon, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. So Peter, the guy who does this website, he put an AK there for the moon because I believe that indicates it's the Atma Karaka. Let me scroll down and double check that. Yeah, so the moon has the highest degree out of all the planets, which makes it Atma Karaka. Atma Karaka means the Karaka of the self. So that shows this album has a dual self of an exalted moon in Taurus and an exalted sun in Aries. Because the sun is always going to be a signifier of the self. It'd be called, I think, is it Stitha Karaka? Like a fixed Karaka. You're always going to have sun as Karaka of self, but the highest degree planet is going to be the Karaka of self as well, and we have moon here. It's the highest degree of the traditional 7 grahas, or planets. So, this is an album that, like all the greatest art ever made, in my view, or most of it, it's always going to have a balance of yin and yang, and this is the most exalted yin and yang balance. If you look at any, like, Rolling Stone, Spin Magazine, or Pitchfork, any kind of, like, music journalism list of the greatest albums of the 80s, this album is going to be in the top 10 every single time, right up there with you might see Prince, Purple Rain, Michael Jackson, Thriller. You might see the Smiths. The Queen is Dead. I believe, is that what that album's called? So I mean, but this album is always in that top 10 because it was so revolutionary. Like Kurt Cobain himself said, there would have been no Nirvana without it. And Kurt Cobain was someone that was like very outspoken for women's rights and to fight against homophobia. And he had a very strong connection to yin, feminine energy, as well as this very strong masculine energy too, that would scream and be really intense and exciting in that kind of way. And he was very competitive, like even though, maybe part of him didn't want to be and look down on people that were competitive, but he was competitive. If you read more about him, he wasn't obsessed with being number one, but he would get competitive with other, musicians at times and stuff like that. These sort of traditional yang energy elements. So, but this album, it's a balance of both. So with that, let's jump into the, Mr. Yang and Mrs. Yin of this album, really, because we have Frank Black and Kim Deal's charts up next. And this is Frank Black, at the time known as Black Francis, which is an interesting way for him to have named, like just flip his names around and use the word Black as his first name, which is his actual Black last name. And then I've never heard of anyone doing that before. It's just such an odd thing to do, really, if you think about it. And he also altered his name from Frank to Francis, so it almost makes you think of, like, I guess Pope Francis, but that wasn't the Pope at the time, so I don't know where he got that from. So that's, yeah. And then as soon as the Pixies broke up, he changed his name back to his real name, Frank Black. As far as I know, that's his real name. I'm not sure. Okay, so we have Ascendant in Cancer again, so the ruling planet's going to be Moon for Frank Black, and he has his moon in Taurus this time, in the 12th house by sign, in Gemini. So there's an element of transformation. There's an element of his mind with moon in direct. That, you know what that is? Oh my gosh. Wait, is that an eclipse? Is that a full moon? No, it's not an eclipse. But that's so odd because if it was an eclipse, the sun would have to be in conjunction or opposition to the moon. But however, that moon in direct conjunction with Rahu is wild. I mean that just means that he's got a wild imagination, a very wild personality. I mean, he's going to be someone, and it's going to be more internal for him because it's in the 12th house where things are hidden. He's not someone where you just see him and he's always acting crazy, but he puts it into his art clearly because his music is crazy, his lyrics are crazy, the way he screams is crazy. It's like everything about him was outside of the box. He was having lyrics that were just overtly kind of provocative in different ways, but not just for the sake of it, in a way that was truly artistic and purposeful and personal to him. So if he talked about violence, it was about his own fears of violence. And if he talked about sex, it was it was kind of breaking this taboo of talking about sex in a beautiful way where it could also kind of be, just raunchy a little bit. His lyrics are just surprisingly like that sometimes. But then he would just write about anything. He'd write about being in love and compare his love to a pig in Hawaii. He was very imaginative and outside the box, and his greatest inspiration was the Beatles, and they were so imaginative and outside the box, and they were breaking taboos when it came to things that could be said in songs at the time. So he just followed their lead, really, just for a different era. But the Ascendant is in Punarvasu, which is a sign. It's of just great out there thinking, especially in the first pada of Punarvasu. You're going to have that fiery element of just seeking something really deep, really profound, really out there and original, and you're looking for it. You're not caught. It's interesting. It's just a very elevated place for an artist's mind to be, a musician's mind to be in that way. I mean, a higher degree of Punarvasu would be very common for someone who's more spiritually focused. And I wouldn't call him spiritually focused, but I would call him just very imaginative and kind of out there in his own way as a songwriter, for sure. There'd be no Radiohead, no Nirvana, no so many things without the Pixies and without his brilliant songwriting. So I highly recommend you check out their music if you haven't, obviously. But yeah, so the moon, yeah, I don't know. Let's just look at the sun real quick. So the moon, well, the moon's the ruler. So he's someone who's kind of focused on death and destruction and change and transformation. That's why his lyrics can be so like intense, I guess, at times. But the music is so melodic and beautiful, you don't even think about it. That's kind of the funny kind of thing about him. And then his sun is in conjunction with Mercury and Venus. So that's kind of and it's in Aries and Ravati. So again, we have April 6th. So again, we have an Aries, an exalted sun in the 10th house. So that's just very powerful. Sun and Mercury in the 10th house are what's called Bhava Karikas. It means like they're things that for the 10th house is going to make you really, and this is 10th house by sign, by the way, 11th house by cusp. 11th cusp is in here. So that's just very auspicious. I mean, it means that he is like got this great ability to succeed at whatever his career is that's going to involve imagination and communication because of Venus and Mercury with the sun, and attention to detail with Mercury, and he's going to be really successful at it because the 11th cusp is like together with the 10th house by sign. It's just really great combination, and it's going to be really out there stuff because it's in Ravati, and because we're doing sidereal nakshatras and tropical signs or rashis, that really means that, you know, this is something unique to our age. Whereas, like, if I looked at this entirely sidereally, then that would put all of this in Pisces, which shows he's imaginative. But really, that's just all happening in Ravati anyway. But it happening in Aries makes a lot more sense because his sun in Aries shows he has this very dynamic personality that is put entirely into his work, entirely into the 10th house. Like, I mean, I'm just curious now. If we go down to his 4th house by sign, I mean, we've got like a Libra with nothing in it. And we've got the 5th cusp, which shows like at home, he likes to like tinker on the guitar and come up with songs, which if you ever like read interviews with him, he is kind of like a nerd about songwriting. And he never wants to repeat himself. He's always like really brutal about wanting to come up with a chord progression that no one has ever done before, or a lyrical idea no one's ever done before. And that just shows how his creativity of the 5th cusp is happening in the 4th house where he's at home. He'll just like kind of just come up with his music there. And I'm not going to go into his whole chart. I mean, that Lilith on the descendant, I mean, in opposition to the ascendant is very intriguing. I mean, that shows an obsessiveness towards whatever he's towards the opposite sex or his partner or whatever, his like bandmates, like this really obsessive kind of potentially controlling energy, but really just like inspiring energy since he's a musician. And we could look at aspects, like there's a square aspect here up to the sun, Venus, and Mercury. So, I mean, yeah, there's just the bottom line with this guy is, I mean, he's got the same exalted sun that their first album did. So that album is very reflective of his soul, his heart, you know, what he really wants to communicate. And it's in Ravati, which is a sign where like things can seem kind of crazy because it's the end of the whole sidereal zodiac. If you start with Ashwini, I mean, it's close to the end. If you start with Kritika, you know, that's something I haven't come to a final conclusion on because there's debate about that. The oldest Vedic texts put Kritika as the first nakshatra. But that's just an aside. I mean, if we look at it as the last sign of the Indian zodiac of the nakshatras, it really just means that his heart is in this place and his soul is in this place where he needs to communicate something incredibly imaginative. And he's living in this age in 2020, you know, like, or just the 20th century or 21st century, where Aries is connected to these sidereally Pisces-related nakshatras, I would just put it that way. So Ravati, for anyone who's more familiar with a full-on sidereal Vedic interpretation, I mean, I'm going to, like I said in my last video, I'm going to have to do a deep meditation and analysis into how this has shifted with the age and the way I'm looking at it right now. Because it fits. It fits that this guy has an exalted sun and he's also imaginative. And the way that Venus and Mercury are interacting with Ravati, I mean, Ravati is Mercury ruled through the Vimshatari Dasha system. And, you know, Venus is friends with Mercury. The only problem here is that, they're both incredibly combust. So there's something kind of there's tension there with this guy. But it's all happening in the 10th house. There's going to be tension with his communication, tension with how he communicates about creativity. And they did break up pretty early on, and he went out on his own as a solo artist, and he couldn't really like get the same level of popularity or acclaim from his solo career. And then after Fight Club, it was only a matter of time really before they got back together to play the music everyone wanted to hear, that they loved to play. And they came out with like 4 new albums at this point, I think. So, which aren't as good as the original in my view, but like still, like have a lot of great songs on them. Really, just like it's, and it's really nice. It's kind of a cozy energy to the band at this point. They're all friends. It's just unfortunate that Kim Deal has left the band, perhaps because of her own drug issues, or maybe it's just not fun for her. I'm not sure at this point why she's not in the band, or if it's a personal like issue between her and Frank Black or the other members or something. But yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I mean, the mind of the album, or the mind of Frank Black, is in transformation. His sun is in Ravati. He needs to come up with brand new things in this exalted sun way in the 10th house. I mean, very auspicious, very powerful. Jupiter in the 11th house by sign also, that's the house Karaka there. So, I mean, just lots of great stuff happening here for him. So I'm just going to move on. So yeah, you're not surprised this guy is one of the most, beloved, influential musicians like of the last 50 years or whatever. And so now we're going to look at Kim Deal. You could say the yin to his yang for the first 4 Pixies albums. And yeah, so she's got her ascendant in Purva Falguni in Virgo. So she's got this really ambitious energy. Now, I talked a lot about Purva Falguni. That actually connects to Fight Club as well. So if we just jump back to Fight Club's chart real quick, you could see, let's see, where was that? Yeah, the sun of the movie Fight Club was in Purva Falguni, and the Mercury as well. So there's this energy about that movie that was like that was kind of seductive and kind of like ambitious in this kind of working really hard to start a family kind of energy. I mean, Purva Falguni has that kind of energy attached to it. And Kim Deal herself, I mean, her first song, like, on this album, it's, like, literally inspired by some kind of interracial relationship from a very sexual perspective. And the song is, I don't even know how a song like that would be taken if it came out today. But at the time, it just had this kind of edgy, upfront sexuality and romance together with it in a very sweet way from a woman's perspective. And so, like, that's just really interesting that's on her ascendant. It shows that maybe that's just a part of her personality, that she's kind of, I don't know, sensual, let's say, and also works really hard. Like I think she was like a scientific researcher before she joined the Pixies, actually, and she just graduated college and was doing research. And of course, we have like her Venus in the 8th house. And we could look at 8th house stuff, but I don't want to like analyze her research part of her career or see if there's anything in Scorpio, which, I mean, there's Neptune in Scorpio and there's a cusp. But I'm just going to leave that alone because we're just going to stick to Moon, Sun, and Lord of the Ascendant, which in this case would be Mercury with the Sun not really actually, but the Sun is again in the 10th house, very auspicious to her, 10th house by sign. Mercury's in the 11th by sign. Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, what can I say about, and she's got the exalted Taurus. That's just incredible. I mean, the exalted moon in Taurus with the 9th cusp. I mean, honestly, that's just incredible because, I mean, when we looked at, I mean, her birthday is like 4 years. I mean, there's no relationship between her birthday and Frank Black's birthday, or the album's birth chart, if you could say it that way, of their first album that got them famous. It got their first big hit that she made, Gigantic, and it got their biggest hit that got the band back together 11 years later. It got them not back together immediately, but it got them really famous with the film Fight Club because of the song Where's My Mind. And yeah, I mean, the thing that's mind-blowing is she has the exalted moon, and Frank Black has the exalted sun, as we just saw, in Aries. And, I mean, that's a 1 out of 12 chance, statistically, that either of them would have that. And, it's the fact they both have it, and their debut album has it both. And they're really like the yin and yang that made this magical combination, that made this that's what this is revealing. This is revealing that their first album and the way the band started, the magic really was between the two of them. And I remember when I first heard Kim Deal's vocals on Pixies music combined with Frank Black's vocals and the music itself, and her bass playing is so prominent and interesting, even and just fun. It's like there's like this joy in her music. There's this other song she has called Into the White, and that's interesting that Frank Black, or Black Francis, and her one of her only songs in the band really is called Into the White. You know, it's like this white black yin yang. And even like her first lead single, Gigantic, was about an interracial like film or romance or something that was, I don't know if that was like an edgy thing at the time. I mean, obviously that's not even a term people use now, like outside of like pornography or something, which is pretty gross to think about. But I mean, yeah, it's like people can have relationships, you know, and it doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter if a woman is in a band or not. But like at the time, these were all like kind of more surprising or like exciting things. Cause like I said, the really popular rock music at the time was all dudes pretty much just, and all the women present representation was being an object. Whereas in the Pixies, Kim Deal was like, had this lead single that was like basically referring to a guy's like penis in some way, you know, and the song's called Gigantic. And it's like this interesting like flip of energies where it's like, but it's like fun and it's like, it's light. It's not weird and gross. In fact, I never even made that connection in my mind. And then right around the same time we had, and their debut album was released by Steve Albini, which we're going to get to. And gosh, he also produced the first or second PJ Harvey album right around the same time as this first Pixies album, which was the same kind of energy where PJ Harvey also had music that was totally about her sexuality in a very overt way and objectifying men in a way that was like kind of like sweet and endearing and not like gross, you know, which is what I get from Kim Deal with that. So, I mean, yeah, I'm at Frank Black's charts. Let me go back to Kim Deal. Yeah, we got the Exalted Moon in Taurus. I mean, we've got an ascendant with Mercury in the 11th sign, which is Cancer, and Ardra. So her mind is really focused on this kind of tension. Like it's in the third pada or the desire pada and air pada of Ardra. So Ardra is all about the storm, the conflict. It's very good for artists in general to have something going on there because it's the thing that gives an edge. And, you know, you could also see with her that having a Mercury in Ardra, which could be a mind that's kind of conflicted about things, could also eventually lead to her problems with addiction. I mean, there's going to be other indicators in the chart for that as well that I'm not going to look for because I just want to keep this moving. And then we got her sun in the 10th house, very auspicious, like I said, just like Frank Black does. So they were kind of like a match made to get famous together, you could say. And then sun is friends with Mercury, so it's in the sign of Mercury, Gemini. It's in the sign of Mrigasharsha, which shows her heart is really in this place of wanting to keep exploring. Mrigasharsha is like it's the deer in the forest that's like looking for something beautiful, and it's looking for soma. So that could be another like heroin, like drug addiction connection there. I mean, because I think her and the drummer were the only two that kind of had that problem that affected the band. And the moon in Bharani, I mean, that's the moon ruled nakshatra in the middle of Taurus. It's just unbelievable that's how that worked out, really. So it means her mind is just going to be so creative, so focused on beauty. I mean, Kim Gordon, out of everyone in the band, I mean, Frank Black was like the guy in the band everyone knew, you know, and when he had a solo career, it kind of just went to like a really low level plateau where I saw him play live in high school and there weren't that many people in the show. And now the Pixies, they play stadiums basically for the last 20 years. But as a solo artist, he could never get like a 10th or like a 20th of that level of recognition, or 100th maybe. You know, there's no famous Frank Black songs, sadly. I mean, I could name a few I like that are really catchy. I mean, he has one solo album I love called Dog in the Sand, I think, that I love. And he has a lot of songs I love, and he's so creative. But Kim Deal was the one that had a solo project that really took off, that got like tons of radio play, critical acclaim, I mean, she made more money from that than anything she made in the Pixies, like, which was her band The Breeders with her sister Kelly deal. And they had the song Cannonball that was a huge hit, and Kurt Cobain was a huge fan of them. They went on tour with Nirvana a couple times at least, and they made great music for years to come, really. And I don't know if she's doing now, but she's a very talented, imaginative musician. And so that, like, Mercury, or that sun in Mrigasharsha, shows her heart needs to keep taking her into a place, new places, she never does the same thing, you know? And Mercury in Ardra shows she's also just interested in different ideas that are kind of like, just interesting and cutting edge and kind of thing. And then the moon in Bharani shows that she has a very elevated sense of aesthetics. That, I mean, everything she's ever made and been involved with, unlike Frank Black, is like very aesthetically like innovative, even if it's not popular. Whether it's popular or not, it's just very cutting edge in some specific way. And Frank Black sort of has these albums that are more like bar music. That's good. It's nice, but he has like so many songs he wrote that all kind of sound similar, that are just like good songs. But I mean, Kim Deal was always trying to break the mold more so. So she was kind of pushing the Pixies, and I don't think it's a coincidence that since she didn't join since they had a reunion for the last 15 years and got back together, she hasn't been in the band, and all the music they've made is not nearly on the same level, not nearly as innovative. And I was just watching a recent live concert where, like, they, where, like, the girl that replaced her, who's been in the band longer than she was ever in the band at this point, probably by a factor of 3 or something, or 5 years, like because the Pixies were only around for 4 or 5 years, really, or something like that. And so... But the girl who's been in the band now, it's like she still sings like Kim Deal, and there's something a little odd about that. Like, there's something odd about Kim Deal's way of singing just being like an archetype that some other girl is singing longer than she ever did in the band. There's just something a little odd about that, or woman, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, her chart is just really, you could see a lot of the things that she's known for that bring it all together. And really the coolest thing I'm noticing just off the bat is, I mean, she's bringing the feminine energy, the yin energy, and she has the exalted moon, and she has Venus in Taurus as well, and it just goes on and on. And then you got the moon and Venus together for their debut album that made them explode, right? That's Fight Club. Yeah, so you got Moon and Venus together in Bharani, in Taurus, exactly where her Moon and Venus are. They're both in Taurus. Same thing, same deal, Kim Deal. That's where the exalted moon comes from. That's where Venus in its own sign. I mean, it's just, what an amazing, amazing synchronicity. And then the exalted sun, connecting to Frank Black's chart. I mean, and the two of them coming together for this debut album that changed both of their lives and the history of music forever. Like, oh my gosh, where do we even go from there? Like, seriously. So here's the single, Gigantic. I don't know if we need to go into this too much. I mean, and also, like, there's something else about her Purva Falguni ascendant that I feel like I'm not giving justice to it, because, I mean, I that's a harder one for me to analyze on the feminine energy perspective. But because I'm very familiar with it for when it shows up in a male body or male dominant energy person's chart. For a woman, I mean, it really just means she's going to be ambitious. She's going to want to keep up with the boys, so to speak, and she really did. I mean, she was a scientist. She was a freaking researcher in a laboratory before she joined a rock and roll band that became world famous, and it has like some of the most famous songs of all time, like "Where's My Mind," and then she wrote the first big hit for the band. So, I mean, this is really just an ambitious sign. Purva Falguni, it's not, like, always about sex. Like, it tends to be related to building a family. She was also married, like, at a younger age before the band started. I mean, so I think her and her husband got divorced at some point, but I'm pretty sure of that. But basically, I mean, so Purva Falguni, someone with prominent Purva Falguni positions in their chart, planets or the ascendant, sun, moon, they're going to be very focused on starting a family or on, like, just spreading their seed, so to speak, and wanting to, like, just just sort of very ambitious in some way that's going to lend towards starting a family if that's in the cards, or they're going to become like a playboy, playgirl kind of situation. And they're going to like do a lot of interesting or uninteresting work, but they're going to like be very good at whatever they do. And the Enneagram personality system, Perva Falguni, relates very well to the Enneagram 3 type in that sense. But yeah, for Kim Deal, it was just, yeah, she just worked really hard to like be a great bass player in a rock band and keep up with everyone else and outshine them as a songwriter with this first single, because she had the first hit that got the band famous. And I don't really know if I want to look into this chart too much. I'm not feeling a call to it so much. I mean, we do have Sun in its own sign. Oh wait, I didn't even change this. Hold up. So I'm gonna, change that. Eventually we'll get it so you can have your own like sort of settings that you could put in your profile. I think Peter's gonna add that feature soon. But the Sun is actually, it's still in Leo at the very end. That's interesting, in Maga. So this is, we're looking at right now the single, Gigantic. So Sun at the end of Leo in Maga, it kind of feels like a joke. It kind of feels like funny. Like this is the biggest Leo could get, but at the same time, because it's at the end of an odd numbered sign, it's kind of deflated. So it's like this deflated take on masculinity, where she's saying the word gigantic, but she's saying it from this feminine being in love perspective, not something macho at all. It's taking all the energy out of macho, but from a woman's perspective of being in love, basically, because it's really a love song. It's not actually a sexual song, but it sort of has this tongue-in-cheek element to it because of the title, and I guess the inspiration for it, which I just read on Wikipedia, came from some kind of independent film that was about an interracial couple. But yeah, and then we have the moon in Sagittarius, so the song is, it's focused on something that's aspirational with Jupiter and Uranus, so there's this lot of energy in the song. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's very beautiful, and ascendant in Chitra is very beauty, and the ruler of Libra is Venus, and where's Venus located? It's in the 9th house in Cancer. So yeah, another Venus-Moon connection. And I don't know. I don't feel like the need to read into this song anymore because it's not even one of my favorite songs by them. But I just thought it was significant because I feel like we already covered Kim Deal enough. But yeah, so I mean, the funniest thing or most interesting thing is just that we have a Sun at the end of Leo. So this like masculine energy getting put into the Maga level of the king at the end of Leo, the sign of the king, and it's in the 10th house, the house of the king. It's like everything about this couldn't be more macho. But what's really going on here is we have, an ascendant. Well, the ascendant's in Scorpio, but we have, but why was I looking at Venus? Now I'm a little, oh, no. I'm sorry. Why did I say ascendant's in Scorpio? Ascendant's in Libra. It's at the very end of Libra. We have the ascendant. So yeah, it's this feminine energy sign because it's ruled by Venus in a feminine energy sign of Cancer. So this is really just echoing what we saw when we looked at the album, Surfer Rosa. And it's also echoing the feminine aspect related to the masculine aspect. If we were to look at, if there were singles released, I mean, and there are for future albums, but this was the only one for the first album, Surfer Rosa. But if we had something tantamount to look at Frank Black related, I'm sure we'd see something else, but we're looking at a Kim Deal written song, the only song she ever wrote that became a single, and it became their biggest hit at the time, that got on college radio, that got them kind of famous, early on in like the underground scene or the punk rock scene, and they were selling out shows really quickly at clubs. So, that Sun in Maga, the Venus in Cancer being the ruling lord of the chart of this song, Gigantic. I think I've said all I have to say about it. I mean, it's all right there, right? And so then we've got, to wrap up this album, we've got Steve Albini's chart, the producer of the album, and he's one of my favorite producers. I mean, there's not too many, there's only a handful of producers whose names I even know and remember and care about, so to speak, and inspired me as a musician and fan of music. So, I mean, Steve Albini's one of those dudes, he's like known for being a Chicago guy, and he's just made a lot of legendary albums, including Nirvana's last album, In Utero, and, this legendary Pixies album, Surfer Rosa, PJ Harvey's first album, and then he just based off of those, he wound up recording just a million other albums since then. I mean, he worked with Joanna Newsom, my favorite album by her, and it just goes on and on from there. So I just want to look at his chart real quick because he's a legendary producer. He had a very unique approach to recording music that kind of changed the game, so to speak, and for a lot of people in the 90s especially. And because it was very underproduced, where in the 80s production was very like bombastic, like the big hair of the 80s bands. And his style was the opposite, where he just wanted to capture the music as it was live in a very punk rock style, in a very authentic style. So let's see what shows up in his chart that could be related to those factors or anything else I may be aware of about him. Yeah, so I would sort of expect a Moolah placement if I had to guess, but I mean, I'm not good at like guessing signs. But yeah, and in fact, there's nothing in Moolah, because Moolah is all about getting down to the roots of something. So his style just makes me think of Moolah, but that's not what we're seeing here. So let's learn something. Let's see what actually shows up. So he has a Libra ascendant, just like Kim Deal did, which means Venus is going to be the ruler of the chart, and Venus on his chart is it's in the 11th. It's in Virgo. Okay, well, it's together with Pluto and Lilith, not far from Uranus. So that's a lot of afflictive energy, heavy energy of like explosiveness of Pluto, the kind of like woundedness and obsessiveness of Lilith, and then the explosiveness of Uranus. That's like a double whammy, So I'm just gonna say, like, his Venus, his feeling of like comfort is just not there. It's like he's not a comforting person to be around. He's like so that's kind of the energy of Moolah, funny enough. It's like that energy of kind of a harsh, brittle, like energy. And for him, this is happening in Purva Falguni. Interesting. So another thing about Purva Falguni that is very consistent is it's someone who just wants to work. They don't care like who they're working for, if it's like the best thing. They literally don't care if they're in like the biggest movie ever or just a movie. They just want to work because their goal is to start a family. The goal is just to like provide for themselves and whoever their dependents are. I mean, their goal is just to work, and it might come from someone with like a childhood who was kind of like, the parents didn't have enough money. So this person, their reaction to that is just, they're like, I'm always going to have a job. I'm always going to be doing the next project. And there's something like almost Saturn-like related to it in energy, but it's not Saturn energy. It's actually Venus energy. Purva Falguni is a Venus-ruled sign, and Venus is here, but it's an afflicted Venus with Pluto and Lilith. So that's an interesting Yin Yang combination as the ruler of this producer of Surfer Rosa, Steve Albini's chart, where basically what we're learning here is like, okay, the thing I didn't say is I've had quite a few friends who've recorded albums with Steve Albini, and that's not because I'm friends with famous bands or people who are super wealthy or whatever who play music, although, there's all types of people I know, and some would fall into that category and most wouldn't. But basically the reason why I know all these people who recorded albums with him is because he has very affordable rates. Like, he's the kind of person who could charge 10 times the amount he does and record a tenth of the bands he does, but he has this workman ethic where he always just wants to do the next project, and he wants to have fair rates. He wants bands to be able to come in and out, and he'll just hit the record button, set up the microphone, and give them the exact same treatment that the Pixies and Nirvana got, more or less. Basically. So so all of that is very indicative of this afflicted Venus by Pluto and Lilith and Uranus in this kind of happy, friendly space of, of Mercury ruled sign of Virgo, and its own nakshatra of Purva Falguni. It's like he's working hard, but there's not going to be this extra bells and whistles to it. Like, his style is very sparse. That's why it made me think of Moolah. And so the Venus in conjunction with the 12th cusp in the 12th house by sign, where things are kind of being taken away. It's like he takes everything away and you just get the bare bones. You just get the moolah, which means root. right? Mula, it's like the Sanskrit word for the root of something. So he gets down to the root of it. And so it's this kind of weird Venus in Purva Falguni, which is about trying to get fruit. Purva Falguni means fruit, and you're trying to get the fruit. So he's trying to get the fruit, but he wants like the root of the fruit. And he's doing it in kind of this obsessive way because of Lilith, and this really intense way because of the 12th cusp and Pluto and Uranus all in conjunction. So that's what I'm seeing there. In addition, if we look at the producers, Moon in Revati in Aries, basically we've just got he's overcome. What am I trying to say? He's kind of like passionate about creating new things because Revati is all about, you know, changing things up, especially in its first pada. In Aries, it's going to be this extra fiery passion to like, he's looking for a way to do something different, you know, and his way of doing things different is to take it down to the root, really. Even though nothing in Mula, we still have, you know, this intensity of the afflicted Venus that's also happy. It's like a weird mixture that it's just being put to use that's really intense and gonna just explode all the nonsense and just give you the core. And his mind is focused on the same thing with the Moon in Aries and Revati. It's just really looking at something new that's he's passionate about to create. And I guess, and there's a 7th cusp thing, which means he might not be the most romantic person or the easiest partner to be involved with. And he's also famous for being very harsh in interviews about his opinions of certain things and music. Like, people will call him a curmudgeon because he'll just say, oh, all electronic music after 1980 is awful or not interesting and not original, I think is what he actually said. And so he's sort of like this kind of like, there's something a little silly about how like snobby he can be. Like, he can be very snobby. So it's interesting. So that Moon in Revati with the extra fiery energy with the 7th cusp, it just shows that his mind with relationships is very fiery. It's not going to be very, and like the afflicted Moon, or the afflicted Venus, I mean, you know, he's not going to be a very like feminine energy or like very supportive, like lovey-dovey type of person. And it's going to probably give him challenges with relationships, you know, that he'll learn over time, you know, hopefully how to handle better. And then finally, we just look at, in terms of his music, I mean, it means his mind is just kind of sparse again. I mean, it's kind of the same thing echoed about the ascendant Lord Venus and with all the signifiers there. And then his sun at the end of Cancer in Pushya, I mean, he has the exact opposite kind of placement as Kim Deal did as the Gigantic song did, which is interesting, where that was like a sun at the very end of Leo, where it was really kind of like a dead sun, because it's the final degree, so it doesn't have that much energy. Here it's like a dead sun. I mean, in Sanskrit it would be called Mrita because it's one of the avasthas to say any planet in the final degrees. Oh, no. Actually, it's a baby because I'm sorry, I got that backwards. It would actually be Bala, I believe. So it's like it's like a baby. So it has some energy actually, because we're gonna count the degrees backwards on the even signs. Anyway, so maybe that's. But the sun in the 10th house, that's the most significant thing. And sun is in a sign that it's actually like friends with Moon. So it's very auspicious. Sun in conjunction with, Mercury here in the 10th house and the midheaven, the 10th cusp, all happening here. It means that when it comes down to it, he is kind of like loving and wise on a deep level. He just has a harshness on the surface. Because if he was really that harsh through and through, he wouldn't be able to like make great music or sustain a business for like 30, 40 years like he has as a producer. He'd be like a true curmudgeon and kind of be a hermit by himself, unhappy. But he's not. He has friends. I'm sure he's a really cool dude and really interesting to talk to. He just kind of has harsh, edgy takes on things sometimes, and he likes music that's very sparse. But when we look at his sun at the end of Cancer, I mean, that really is going to mean he does have a soft spot that allows him to work well with artists, because they can feel that he really cares about making the music as great as he can. But where most producers will actually try to play an instrument or do something to spruce up the music, the way he wants to make it better is to take himself out of it. And so that's just a different take on it that we could continue to read into this chart. But actually, I want to jump over to another one because I feel like that's enough about Steve Albini. I'm glad we got to look at his chart, though. And so now we've got a few other things we could look at. I don't know if I want to look at the other members so much. I mean, Joey Santiago's interesting because he's a great guitarist, and he has same birthday as Kim Deal, which is crazy. Just 4 years later, the same year as Frank Black. So, yeah, let's open up like maybe just 4 more charts, and if you stick with me here, we'll have some fun with it. But let's see, Joey Santiago. Wait, why am I not seeing it? Oh, here it is. Okay, Joey Santiago. Let's open that up. Oh, oops, I didn't do the right. Okay, well, I'm not going to edit this video just because I'm doing these really quickly. So if you're sticking around, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And, if you like my energy and style, I mean, of course, when I give a personal reading, it's very different than, this. But, yeah, I mean... But, you're getting a flavor of my personal readings for sure, especially when I'm looking at a person's chart and not the movie or music. But I really like looking at these movie and music things. And let's just open up the next album, and maybe we'll end there. Maybe we'll do a couple others after that. But, because I don't want... Yeah, I like for these videos to not go on too long a lot of the times. But I'm so curious. That's what I love about astrology. There's always more to learn. There's always more to discover, and there's always more to sort of feel your way into in an intuitive way, and then the way that can synchronistically relate to things in your own life. It's like, really, I mean, astrology is such a beautiful thing for all those reasons. The way it has this holographic fractal component to it that I really love. So we don't have an exact birth time for Mr. Santiago, Joey Santiago, the lead guitarist. So we're not going to look at cusps or sign. We're not going to look at cusps. In fact, we can't even do an ascendant for that reason, really. I mean, because that's not going to be accurate, most likely. So the moon, we can... Oh, let's see. Yeah, the moon we're not even sure about, because his moon is close to the cusp of Libra and Scorpio. But the interesting thing is he has the same birthday as Kim Deal. So let's just look at that real quick. I mean, it means... Yeah, so he's going to get along with her because... his sun is also in the 10th house. Look at how many of these people have sun in the 10th house. And it's like, they're some of the most famous musicians in rock music history, as far as I'm concerned. If you're into like indie rock or 90s rock or indie music, like these are like the founders of it. Like Steve Albini as a producer, Frank Black and the Pixies, Kim Deal, and now Joey Santiago. They all have sun. So many of them have sun in the 10th house. It's unbelievable. And that, like I said, that sun directly on the cusp of the 10th house, which is the same as the midheaven. And it's there with Mercury. Mercury and sun are both, and Jupiter. All 3 of those are house karakas. They're signifiers of 10th house activity. So it shows there's going to be very good fortune for him in whatever his career is, most likely. Although there will be tumultuousness because Rahu's there. But Rahu can also boost you into fame, And if we looked at his, if we knew his birth time and we looked at his, dashas, his timing periods of his life, I mean, we could probably find like some connections here because he has 4 planets all coinciding there in that 10th cusp, which is unbelievable. And it's in Mrigasharsha, which shows the creativity and it shows the curiosity, rather, actually. And then Jupiter in Rohini shows this expansive feeling of beauty, because Rohini is all about appreciation of beauty and abundance. And Gemini, all of this happening in Gemini. Gemini is which is the sign of Mercury, of course. I mean, Gemini is all about working through ideas and creativity as well. And so he's going to have a much gentler version of that than some of these other people we were looking at, because that Jupiter is there, and Jupiter really softens things. But there's also an edge to him because of that Rahu. And if you listen to his guitar solos, very influential on the guitarist from Radiohead, Johnny Greenwood, especially on their albums The Bends and OK Computer, because he did this like tremolo style picking and guitar soloing that sort of emulated like I guess surf guitar, as well as like sort of Italian music, or like, what do you call that? Like hammered dulcimer music, if you're familiar, with that. And he had this very original take on melodic guitar solos and guitar writing that, you know, he just has things that are showing he has creativity and curiosity and a sense of beauty all happening with things that are going to make that very potent for him in career because of the 10th house cusp placement here. So, except, of course, I just forgot, there is no 10th cusp. We don't know his time of birth time. But we could still look at it in the sense like a horary or prashna chart. Like, if it shows up like this, maybe that means something. But I don't know. Take some of that with a grain of salt. But it's fun to look at because he has the same sun placement as Kim Deal, the other member of the band. And it's just amazing, you know, that they would both be born on the same day, which gives them the same sun placement tropically or sidereally. So, yeah, okay. So, I don't know. It's a little annoying when you don't have a birth time. It's not as fun especially with Vedic astrology, where we can really get into houses, and we can even get into things like divisional charts. But, yeah, I just want to get one takeaway for Joey Santiago. If it's not the 10th house, it's just the sun involving curiosity, and that Mercury, Jupiter, Rahu conjunction, really stellium there is what you'd call a multiple conjunction like that. And so there's just really a lot of good qualities there for creativity and communication of creativity and like sense of beauty and what's really going to be beautiful to hear, you know, with that Jupiter and Rohini. So, yeah, I'm just going to say all of that is very significant. Other than that, I don't really want to comment on his moon because it really could be showing up in a couple different signs or nakshatras. If it is indeed in Swati in Scorpio, it would make a lot of sense because Swati is going really far out there. So it's a great sign for creativity. And look at how it has this beautiful trine connection to Venus in Ardra. So I could go on and on about that. But he has a lot of things showing up in his chart for an eye and an ear for creativity. Let's just say that. And let's move on to the album Doolittle. I may end this video with this one because my voice is getting a little tired. Or I'll keep going. I don't know. But I'll probably end with this one. We'll see. Because I feel like we've covered a lot in this video already. So Doolittle, this is like probably my favorite album by them. And it's just such a great album. It's like nearly perfect. It's just one of the best albums of it's of the 80s as well. It came out in 1989, April 17th, and we have an Aries spring sun. So, you know, and it's in the 10th house again. Really interesting. So, another sun in the 10th house. And this time we actually know the time the album was released because albums come out when record stores open, and we just placed it in Boston. So we have an accurate house placement of the 10th cusp in Aries with the sun where it's exalted. I mean, geez Louise, you know, it just goes to show you. I mean, it's no joke that sun is the number one karaka of the 10th bhava for a reason. It's like the sun wants to be at its highest point. That's where it shines. That's where the most beautiful things are seen. So if you ever do electional astrology, if you're ever looking for like the best time of year to release something creative into the world, you know, whether it's, you know, you can interpret that so many ways, but it shows you if you do it, you know, between March 20th and April 20th, you're going to have like an exalted sun, but you're going to want it if it's like something involving career, or really at all. If you do anything, you know, the implication here is for electional astrology, in Sanskrit that would be called the muhurta, right? So like you're basically looking for the best moment to do something. So one theme we're getting from all of these Pixies thing, it's like they're just like knocking down strike after strike after strike in bowling terminology, you know, like they're just like hitting home run after home run with what they did, especially on these first two albums. And it's also in the birth charts of like almost every person involved with the music, including the producer who recorded their first album. I couldn't find the birth chart for the guy who produced their last three albums, Gil Norton, unfortunately, but because he had a very iconic sound too that I'm not as much a fan of, but it is very iconic. But what I'm getting at here is this sun in Aries in the 10th bhava, with the 10th bhava cusp, and it's the 10th, house by sign, meaning we're starting from a Cancer ascendant, which puts Aries as the 10th, whole sign house is what I mean by that, even though we're doing Campanus house cusps here as well, which is something I've learned from Ernst Wilhelm that he discovered from his own research and analysis and translation of ancient Sanskrit texts and stuff like Brihat Parashara, Horisastra, and Jaimini and stuff like that. But basically, what I'm saying here is, if you're going to do anything in end of March through end of April that's going to land the sun in Aries, you want to look at the time of day, because you want the time of day to put the sun in the 10th house. If you do that and you're doing something related to career, you're going to have a way better chance of it really like exploding, because then you're going to get the full power of that exalted sun at that time of day, which might be around 11 a.m. I don't know if that's true for the whole month, but I mean, gosh, that's just incredible. I mean, because that's only going to be 2 hours a day when that's going to happen, basically. So you're going to want to time it for that 2 hours if you really want to get that sun that's exalted, not just by sign in Aries, but also by house placement or bhava cusp placement in the 10th house, or the conjunct to the 10th bhava, you could say. And it's also conjunct the 11th bhava here, but it's in the 10th house by sign, which I think is obviously significant since it's showing up in all these charts. So Doolittle, this was another revolutionary album, also influential on like every band from the 90s. It's my favorite by them. Ascendant is in Punarvasu, a sign that I love. It's and where things go really far out. I forget if Kim Deal had that or somebody else had that. And it's in Cancer, so again we have this feminine energy, just like we had with Surfer Rosa. Surfer Rosa also had a Cancer ascendant, and which was their first album, as I mentioned. This time it's in the 3rd house, so the moon is not exalted like it was with Surfer Rosa. However, moon and Mars are friendly to one another, and it just shows there's going to be this fiery strength and ambition with this album, and it really is. It's an album that's just, and again, we have another Purva Falguni. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's not Scorpio, it's Virgo. I didn't say Scorpio, I said 3rd bhava. And so that 3rd bhava relationship has this Mars energy. That's what I was thinking of. I don't know if I said Scorpio, but it's in Virgo, and it's in Purva Falguni again, which is Mercury ruled, which moon loves Mercury. It doesn't work the same way the other way around, but I mean, moon is really benefited from that. So it's attention to detail, and we're in this very, we're in the 4th pada of Purva Falguni, where things are getting very, out there and spiritual, matching the Punarvasu. So the ideas on this album are very far out and just changed music forever, really, even more than Surfer Rosa, in my opinion. Surfer Rosa just put them on the map, and it gave them their all-time biggest hit. But as far as an album, Surfer Rosa is a little bit one note. It's a great album, but it's more like one notey in the punk rock way, whereas this album, the creativity is just through the roof. They just redesigned how songs could be written, basically. It's a lot like the Beatles, how the Beatles' first albums were really one notey, but very catchy and good. But by the time they got to I guess Rubber Soul and Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album, it was just the creativity was through the roof. So this is when the Pixies started to have creativity just going through the roof. And so the moon placement there in Purva Falguni, it's that ambition that we had in multiple charts of people related. So you start to see the synergy now between the people making the music and the different pieces of, releases, and how they're all, related with similar signs. Punarvasu's come up 2 or 3 times. Purva Falguni's come up in almost every chart we've looked at. Sun and Exalted Sun in Aries has come up in almost every chart we've looked at. Sun with 10th bhava in almost every chart we've looked at. I mean, this is just unbelievable, these, things. And so the lord of the chart is the moon in that Virgo. So so there's attention to detail on this album, and there's a lot of ambition with this album, with the 3rd cusp involved. So and that 3rd cusp is going right up to basically the sun, you could say, in some kind of relationship. I mean, that's not, well, yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily an aspect there, but this relationship between sun and moon, since that's what we're focused on here, and the lord of the ascendant here is the moon. So we're getting, again, echoed in a more mature way than even Surfer Rosa had, this like balance of like exalted sun and also moon at the core of it. So it's more emotional. It's not just trying to blow you away and be impressive. Also, Sun and Venus in close conjunction, and Venus and Taurus, its own sign, in the 11th, with the 11th cusp there, in the 11th house by sign. Yeah, everything's just in a beautiful location. I'm not seeing anything afflicted at all with these albums that are legendary and considered the greatest of the 80s, that were so influential to the music of the 90s. I mean, it's just kind of amazing. It's like looking at like a, I mean, if I looked at the rest of the chart, we could see where the problems were, you know, because this album does have one song on it that's a little weird. Actually, Kim Deal sings on at the second to last song, called Silver. It's not a bad song. I actually like it. But yeah, no, it's not a bad album. My least favorite song is, I think, I can't even think of it. No, the whole album is just amazing. It's just such a perfect album. So yeah, Ascendant in Punarvasu is always going to be really auspicious for creativity or spirituality. For creativity, more so in the first two padas, which this is, which one of the other people we looked at was, and for spirituality in the last two padas more so. So that's a little note there for you about Punarvasu. But yeah, and Moon in the final pada, so the imagination is just very spiritual and exalted here. It's not just trying to get things done. It's actually going for something beyond, you know, because you're in the water part of Purva Falguna and the moksha part of liberating from just, you know, status quo. Just like the thing I saw about, like, Steve Albini's chart, he had something in Purva Falguni that wasn't in the fourth pada, and he was more focused on just working. Like, he just loved to work and get things knocked out, you know, in a very clean, simple way at the root of things. Whereas this album has a contrast where, like, the moon is more like in the watery part of Purva Falguni, and it's going to try to, in fact, we'll finish this off by just jumping into the Navamsha real quick and see exactly where that moon is located real quick. And because now I'm curious, that moon, because it's going to be in a water sign, because that's how this works. Wait, no, it's in an air sign. That can't, what did I get wrong here? Okay, am I making a fool of myself? Did I make a mistake? Wait, what's going on here? Oh, it's, okay, no. It's the water sign by, no, it should be a water sign, shouldn't it? Because it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there may be a glitch with something here I'm going to have to look into later. Because, I mean, the way this works is you've got, like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, oh, you know what it has to do with probably? It has to do with this tropical versus sidereal way that I'm still kind of getting used to, I guess. And so if we were doing 100% sidereal, then what I just said would be true, that the moon would be. In fact, let me see if I can save some face real quick about my prediction of it being water sign based. Because I'm pretty sure if I switch this to sidereal real quick, full on sidereal, now I think the moon should be, yeah, and now we have the moon in Scorpio, just like I thought. So now we have the moon in a water sign. So I don't know. Now I'm getting on some kind of funky details that aren't all that helpful even at this point. But I guess the mind of the album on the Navamsha being in Gemini, if we just want to end off on that. I mean, we could ignore the nakshatra really for the divisional chart. We might, actually, I think we need to, like, put that in as an optional thing, because traditionally almost pretty much no one uses nakshatras and divisional charts. I have done that as a technique because it was available in the software Jagannath Hora, and I find it very effective if you really go for it, but it's a bit more out there, and so I don't know. I don't want to look at the nakshatra right now, so let me actually just jump over to this other chart. So on the Navamsha, this album has Moon in Gemini. I mean, and, you know, on the birth chart, we had Moon in Virgo. So what's interesting there is Mercury rules both of them. So the album is just very clever. It's very, like, attention to detail and clever. The moon is with, like, its best buddy, to it, but not the other way around. So the moon is getting the benefit of that meticulous attention to detail and that bouncing back and forth of ideas between everyone involved. And it's just like a very fun, creative space. The fact that you have moon in both of the Mercury ruled signs on, the Rashi, the D1 chart, and the Navamsha, the D9 chart. So that's a really interesting thing. And you could see that in anyone's birth chart. If they have a moon that's in both Mercury ruled signs between both charts, you're going to have someone who has a very highly advanced attention to detail and is very meticulous, but is also like very playful and likes to bounce ideas back and forth because their mind is really benefited from the full spectrum of like possibilities, left and right brain. And so, which really echoes the whole like sun, moon, yin yang, masculine, feminine energy balance as well, which I think is a great note to end on. And, there's other things I could have covered here, but I'm just going to, like we had it all lined up for all 4 of their albums, and we didn't look at the drummer's chart, but, I think that's fine. So we'll just end off here, and like and subscribe for more videos like this, and feel free to leave any comments if you want to suggest other things you'd like me to cover in the realm of music or movies, or just in general about Vedic astrology. I'm going to do more series just about Vedic astrology in general as time goes on, and also demonstrating all the features of astroseek.com that Peter has added and I've helped to add for Vedic astrology features, and I'm just really excited to see that to continue to progress. I'll also wind up doing videos using other softwares like Kala software and Jagannath Hora and some apps. I like to switch it up, but this is very convenient because I have a lot of things in this database. It's a very convenient database to kind of open charts in, and there's so much you could play with. I mean, like I said, down here we didn't get into Panchanga at all because that's a whole thing, and we didn't get into Arudhas or Charkarikas or all the divisional charts. Oh my goodness. So I mean, there's like so much to go through and have fun with this kind of stuff. And I highly recommend you just like, if you're into Vedic astrology, this is just like and you start learning the basics from a book or anybody's YouTube channel. This is a website that will give you access as time goes on to all the basic features of Vedic astrology, of Jyotish. But also like Kala software is like the best Vedic software. I highly recommend it if you want really good professional software on your computer. Anyway, I could go on and on. I'll talk about softwares and those features another time. And if you'd like a personal reading, my email is in the description. And yeah, thank you for watching the video. And if you're not already a fan of the Pixies, I highly recommend you check out these 2 albums. I would start personally, whichever one resonates with you based on what I said, maybe, because you have you might have a very intuitive, energetic, feeling into what I'm saying, and you might want to check something out based on that. But Doolittle, I think, is my favorite album by them, and then the albums they made after Doolittle are great too. Surfer Rosa would actually be like my 3rd or 4th favorite out of their 4 albums, but it's really like a classic, great album. So anyway, gonna end it there. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.